Nothing.
I call Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. It's interesting that Nicky Wagner said that part one was really just a technical matter about a date. Just a small matter of a date. Small matter of 2013 being the date. Like 31st of December 2014 is, I think, when Phillipstown School is being due to merge in with Wilson School. That's just a date as well, just a date. And in fact, Mr Chair, I notice in section 4.1 of the bill, what's actually happening here is the replacement of the definition of the 2013 election. So the definition of the 2013 election, how Orwellian can you get? The definition of the 2013 election becomes 2016 election. So they're actually changing the definition of the 2013 election and trying to tell us that you can have something in 2016 and it can still be the 2013 election. Mr Chair, in all seriousness, I think it's important for the House and those people watching and listening to Parliament tonight to understand the significance of what the government is proposing to do in this bill. The government is proposing to cancel an election, to further take away the rights of a people in a large region of our country from voting. Just stop and consider for a moment what that means. What kind of country are we living in when the central government decides that local people in a large region don't have the right to exercise their vote? And Mr Speaker, Mr Chair, I found a quote that I think sums this up. This quote says, "Elections are central to democracy, but they are not always on their own a magic or quick fix solution." Sounds like something that perhaps the Minister and the Chair might say, or one of the other national members, but no, it was Frank Bainimarama talking about Fiji. That's what he said. Elections are central to democracy, but they're not a magic or a quick fix solution. And the National Party members, as Andrew Williams said, may not like being compared to Fiji, but I'd actually wager there's a chance of an election in Fiji before there would be an election for Environment Canterbury under this government. That's how bad things have got. And this kind of decision is being made. John Hayes says I'm exaggerating. John Hayes says I'm exaggerating. Do the people of Canterbury have the right to cast a vote for their regional council, Mr Hayes, today? Silence from Mr Hayes on the other side of the House. Silence now, because the people of Canterbury don't. And there is no way I can exaggerate this issue, Mr Hayes. Because democracy has been taken away from the people of Canterbury. It's not possible to exaggerate that, Mr Hayes. What that is a fundamental assault on the democratic values of this country. And I actually thought, despite all the differences I might have with the National Party, that they would stand up for democracy. That they would actually believe that this mattered, but they don't. They are arrogant and they don't care about giving the people of Canterbury a say in who governs their region. And John Hayes says it's an exaggeration. It is not, Mr Hayes. They do not have a say in this. Oh, here we go. It's all about personalities for the National Party. It's all about personalities and trying to take down the right to a democratic process for the people of Canterbury because of some personal score that John Hayes and the National Party want to do that. It's interesting, David Carter, when he was responding to some questions about this, when he was the Minister of Local Government, David Carter said that the problem with the Regional Council was that it was ineffective and dysfunctional. Well, if that definitional criteria being ineffective and dysfunctional was a problem, the whole National Party would be out today. Mr Hayes would certainly be out because ineffective and dysfunctional describes him to a T, Mr Chair. So this government has fundamentally undermined democracy. But if we look at this provision in Part 1, let's see who else thinks that this is a bad idea. Because it's not just us, it's not just the opposition parties, it's not just the people of Canterbury, it's actually the government's own officials. The Ministry for the Environment and the Department of Internal Affairs actually told the government not to do this, not to extend the bill out. They actually said, let's work through a process of having a mix of commissioners and elected people and work their way to a fully democratically elected council. That was the advice from officials. Funnily enough, it was also the advice that they were getting from the commissioners themselves. The commissioners themselves were saying, we think we should move to a more democratic model, but this government wouldn't have it. But even within this government, there were people who wanted it. Nick Smith went on the record and said that we would be seeing democratic elections in Canterbury. Mr Chair, that we would be seeing democratic elections in Canterbury. So we've got the commissioners, we've got the Ministry for the Environment, we've got the Department of Internal Affairs, the people of Canterbury, but this government carries on in its arrogant way saying we know best. We know what's right for the people of Canterbury. We know, this government tells us, that the people of Canterbury will be better served not having a say. Well, that fundamentally undermines the principles that this country is built on. And that's why David Rutherford and the Human Rights Commission came to the Council and told them, Leanne Dalzell wants to say, it's worth quoting again, our view continues to be that the undemocratic way in which the original legislation was introduced and its continuance is simply wrong from a human rights perspective. New Zealand likes to stand up in the world, Mr Chair, and tell the rest of the world about the importance of human rights. About going. John Hayes, when he used to run the UN division, proudly run the UN division of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, was part of saying that New Zealand would go out in the world and promote human rights. And yet inside New Zealand, this government tarnishes our image by promoting legislation like this that fundamentally undermines those human rights. Mr Chair, I want to move on briefly to another aspect of this which is covered under Part 1, and that is the question around water conservation orders. Because I think it's very important that we get to the heart of what this is about. This is about water and this is about irrigation. And the fact that that party over there were concerned that the people of Canterbury might have some different ideas about how water would be used. But let's be absolutely clear, as Eugenie Sage has said, and she has a supplementary order paper on this, that there is now a process in place for water conservation orders in the Canterbury region that is different from everywhere else in New Zealand. And there is now no justification for carrying that on. And we've just seen a decision the other day about the Rakaia River going through under the process covered in this legislation. That means that no one in the public was able to have a proper say through the Environment Court, and the decision was simply rammed through. So now they're in a position where they can apply to have a resource consent to build a canal. There's all sorts of things that come out of that decision, and that decision did not go through the same process that would be for any other water conservation order anywhere else in New Zealand. And Mr Chair, that is the problem with this legislation. The government cannot make the case to extend out this denial of democracy to New Zealanders. They might have thought they could have made the case originally. They might have thought that it was possible for them to say at the start in 2010 they could do this. But when they show up here today and they say we want to carry it on to 2016, that is a fundamental breach of human rights. It is a fundamental breach of democracy, and it is a broken promise. And this government cannot mount a defence for that because it's anti-democratic, Mr Speaker. But it's also very important when we look, and my colleague Leanne Dalzell is a well-known exponent of the regulatory impact statement. Very important thing to look at. I'm going to introduce the member's speech by making brief reference to the regulatory impact statement because it is important. In the regulatory impact statement, the point is made, the extension of the Commissioner's terms would continue to deny Canterbury residents the opportunity to vote for representatives. Also, given the progress made by the Commissioners, there is no apparent reason for continuing this level of intervention, which was used in response to ECAN's previous serious and systemic dysfunction. So even if the national government tries to sell us the argument from 2010, what the officials are saying through the regulatory impact statement is that justification no longer exists. So fundamentally and at its principle, this legislation is wrong. But it's also wrong in practice, Mr Chair. It's wrong because there's now no argument. And we have heard no argument from the national government that justifies this. Mr Chair, this is an incredibly sad day for this Parliament, to be here and standing having to debate whether or not a region's people are allowed to vote for their own representatives. I thought that was fundamental in our democracy. It's quite clear the National Party doesn't. We have committed to telling the people of Canterbury when we are elected to government next year, they will have the right to vote for their representatives because that is what is fair and right in this country.
I call Jackie Dean.
Mr Chair, let's remember why the original bill was brought to this House, and that was because of the failure of ECAN. The failure of ECAN